Hey, welcome to the show. Got a very special guest today, Rohan Chakravati. Did I say that right?
Rohan Chakravarthi, close enough.
Chakravarthi.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry about that. He's been at camp every day. This is the hardest working dude in the game in the sense that he doesn't have a credential and yet he has missed 0 time at camp today. You can show up, you can buy a ticket. He's there. And he's been writing, he writes for 49ers Web Zone. He's been writing phenomenal camp reports full of description and detail. And the most important thing, he's very smart, very observant, but he brings the reader there, which is it's the number one job. He does it. So I want to bring him on the show, and I want to discuss each freaking position group one at a time with Rohan, because I'm sure we have different perspectives. So Rohan, thanks for coming on.
And obviously, thanks for coming on. I unfortunately, normally I've been watching your stuff, obviously in awe of your work ethic, especially as well. But because of this time, like you, I have not seen your work at all. I haven't seen a single stream of yours, which is why I'm excited for sure to see how we match up our practice reports.
It's very exhausting once you go, drive to practice, go to practice, digest practice, write, stream. It's like, you don't really have time to take in everyone else's stuff. It's like, man, I got to catch my breath and go to bed. It's exhausting.
Exactly. 100%.
But today's a day off. So we're sort of digesting what's happened. Also, the position coaches talked today. So I can tell you a little bit about what Chris Kosrick said about Drake Jackson and stuff when we get there. But first, they've had 7 practices. We've all seen the same stuff. Let's go position by position, starting with the defense, starting in the back end. What stands out to you so far about the secondary that's frankly drawing rave reviews?
I mean, I don't judge the defensive line as much just because pads weren't on for the first 4 practices or 4 practices. Only for the last 5 of the 7 really pads have been on. Secondary has been the best position group of the entire defense. And you start at the top. Tarvarius Moore, Emmanuel Moseley. Those 2 have been locked down. We've mentioned it a lot. I'm assuming on our respective streams. Ward has been the best cornerback I've seen in a 49er uniform. And this group as well has just been phenomenal. And this, again, is just because I'm in person for this time. So obviously it's comparing over the last few years overall. But when you talk about this position group, those 2 have been phenomenal. They've been able to lock down Brandon Ayuk and Debo Samuel at times. Ayuk will have his days. That's obvious. But Moseley locked down Debo Samuel yesterday on the 2 targets. And then overall, those are the 2 guys, but the depth is there. Deommodore Lenoir has had a great camp. Tariq Castro-Fields is impressing. And while Ambry Thomas is struggling, you still have 4 good cornerbacks on this roster, which makes you a little more confident if one is to go down, because that's been a norm for both players as well.
Right, and you got Jason Verrett lurking in the background.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so you got one thing I've noticed with the corners for one of the safeties that I like, and that's making the defense so much better than last year, in my opinion, is they're pressing a lot.
Yes.
You know, like last year they had this great pass rush and then you played 9 yards off. It's like you really want to concede the quick throw because you have to throw quick against this pass rush. Take that away. Force the quarterback to hold it, to hitch, to move, all of that. And now they are, because that was the idea with Tarvarius Ward. Moseley is doing it. We'll see if he can get away, if he can do it long term. But so far I think he can. And what you're seeing is like Lance, when he reaches the top of his drop, there's pressure and no one's open. And it's like as good as Ayuk is, it takes him a minute to get open against these guys.
Exactly. And I mean, the one thing in my notebook that I feel like I've written every single day, coverage sack. There have been coverage sacks every single day. And that's why it's also hard to grade the offensive line, because the receivers at times haven't been open. And without Debo Samuel at times, when it's the other guys opposite of Brandon Ayuk, Lance is looking for them because Ayuk is being targeted, and they have struggled at times to get open. And then after that, it's just Lance continuing the play and then making a completion or making an incompletion or trying to throw the ball. And so that's been the big thing so far.
The only guys on this offense that can really win one-on-one against this defense Debo hasn't been there, are Ayuk and Kittle.
Yeah.
You could have Jennings one-on-one. He may not win. And not because he's not good, but this secondary is really good right now.
Exactly. And the last thing real quick, you saw yesterday, Trey Lance, 1 of 7 in scrimmage. Oh my God, he sucks. No, the 49ers defense finally did something different. What they did is they played in 2 safety shells a lot more and had 1 safety just over the top covering Brandon Ayuk. There were 2 targets to Ayuk yesterday. Both were off target and out of bounds. But if Trey Lance tries to make that throw, and if it's not pristinely perfect, it's an interception because they had a safety covering him and one of the top 2 corners covering him. So that's been something that I've seen as an adjustment. And Lance is still trying to force the ball there because nobody else is open.
Yeah. Tomorrow, there should be 3 practices in a row where there's Kittle and Ayuk and Debo out on the field together and really see what the offense can do. But right now, the secondary has the advantage. Let's talk safety. Jimmy Ward. Well, is he the best player in the secondary?
Jimmy Ward. I'd say I'd still give the edge, right? At least in camp. If we're talking about camp, I'd say Tarvarius Ward.
It's one of the wards.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the wards.
Definitely one of the wards. Okay, so Jimmy's great. We don't need to talk about. Sorry, Jimmy, you're great. We don't need to talk about you. Let's talk about the strong safeties. What are you seeing from Talanoa and now Tarvarius Moore, who's putting himself in the conversation?
I'm thinking we're seeing some 3 safety sets in 2022. You saw Talanoa, and like Talanoa is interesting, right? Because obviously you already know he doesn't have the necessary speed to maybe cover in the deep end. But what are the other parts of the game? There are so many other parts for a safety. And when in the one-on-one reps, Hufanga started the day strong 2 days in a row. When you first talk about the first day, he locked up George Kittle, deflected the pass, and then yesterday he beat Tyler Kroft on a one-on-one. And yes, he's given up 2 catches as well.
What about Dwelly, though?
Ooh, Dwelly beat him.
Is Dwelly not like surprisingly good in one-on-ones?
He actually is really good. Like I wrote that in my practice report. Dwelly beat Tarvarius Moore and he beat Hufanga, the 2 safeties that could star opposite of Moore.
I noticed this 3 years ago. He runs like a 4.9. Like he's really not moving fast, but he just has this little wiggle at the top of his route, and he's 6'5", and he has the best hands on the team. And you can't. It's hard. You can be right on top of him, and he catches the ball. It's amazing. Anyway, they don't throw him the ball. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, Dwelly just doesn't get action at all in the 11-on-11s. But talking about Hufanga, in the other portions of the game, he's looked good. You talk about the one-on-ones, but he's also had a PBU. He had the interception on Trey Lance on Friday of last week. Overall, Hufanga has looked good initially, but I can also understand the appeal to Tarvarius Moore, whose athleticism appears to be back after the ACL injury. He had the 2 picks. He's been playing a little bit with the first-team safeties, and I'm expecting, at least I'm seeing, especially after you saw the adjustments yesterday, where they debuted the cover 2 look, but also want a safety probably in the box. You might see a couple more 3 safety looks with the versatility that Jimmy Ward has, especially.
Agree. So the only thing left to really address is this nickel spot. And it's funny because the Niners, they play so much 2 wide receiver offense that it's not really an issue for this defense. But really, it's such a good defense that if you were an offensive coordinator game planning against them, you would really, the whole thing would be putting your best wide receiver in the slot all day and seeing what you can do. So eventually the Niners are going to have an answer for Cooper Kupp, DeAndre Hopkins, yada, yada, yada. What do you think? I mean, we see what they're doing. They're rotating. What do you think ultimately the solution will be?
At the moment, it's unclear, right? Because you talk about Denard. Denard got replaced yesterday by Womack, who had a bunch of first-team reps yesterday, which was interesting because you hadn't necessarily seen Womack climb the depth chart. You did see him de-escalate when Dante Johnson took the 1 reps on Saturday. He got his first-team reps yesterday. And I have been stressing this on stream. The slot spot is going to get a lot of targets in 2022. That's the only place really when you can mention all 11 guys on the defense. That's the only place where there might be a question mark because you got 3 good linebackers. You've got 4, whoever the defensive line is, they're going to wreak havoc. And then you've got the top 2 safeties and you got the top 2 cornerbacks with the safeties looking good too. So that slot guy is going to see a lot of action. I'd assume the 49ers have a couple of stunts where they're either going to have, it might be in a way situational where they have a linebacker maybe pick up as well, or they have a safety cover over the top. But the really, to me, I think the biggest theme that we haven't seen because of the two receiver sets, Jimmy Ward is going to probably have his most time ever in the slot. He's played 200 snaps in the last 2 years. He's played 200 snaps apiece in the slot. He's played 400 snaps over the top, 200 in the box, 200 in the slot over the last 2 years. And so I think we're going to see that 200 snap increase, especially because the 49ers seem a little more confident in Tarvarius Moore and Talanoa Hufanga to do their respective jobs.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, who's going to be the 5th DB on the field? It could be Tarvarius Moore. And you could bring Jimmy down to nickel and have to. Hey, that's clever. I like that. They're going to have to experiment with something because right now, like, it's not Darqueze Denard. Sorry, Darqueze. And I'm not sure it's Womack as a rookie or Lenore ever. We'll have to see about that. Frankly, is Lenore even getting reps in the slot?
He hasn't gotten a single rep in the slot, and that's not even a backup rep either.
Rohan is good. Good shit, Rohan. All right. Spiritual Story says Lance doesn't get nearly enough credit for that Houston win last year. He could have really botched that game, ruining our end of the season momentum. There's a lot of pressure on that game.
Yeah.
I mean,
Week
didn't
16.
they do well against other quarterbacks? I know Houston was terrible, but didn't they do well against? Didn't they beat Justin Herbert like the week before?
Yeah, they beat Justin Herbert, and it was a great defensive play, great defensive game by the Texans in that game. And then Lance comes in week 16.
That Niner guy says, "How does Charles Omenahu look?" All due respect, I appreciate the $2. We will get there. We're gonna get to the defensive. So bear with us. Stay with us. We're gonna go in order. We will dedicate that section to you. Let's talk linebackers.
Yeah.
It seems to me like the Niners have an excellent trio of linebackers, and really, there's no reason to really face the Niners' base defense. You got to get them out of their base defense. What do you see from their linebackers?
I mean, that's a great observation. And also it's another thing that we really like, with all due respect to the Niners offense, we haven't seen exactly what is going to be this defense when there are multiple receivers. You haven't seen a 4-receiver look from the 49ers at all this training camp. And so I want to see, like the one thing that we've mentioned is Dre Greenlaw. He's the guy on, Alshire is the guy off in nickel packages. So that's interesting because people thought that might have been a debate. But the linebackers, the most impressive thing for me.
Dre Greenlaw's been on?
Yeah, he's been on.
Wow.
Alshire has been the guy off. And I've been watching the walkthroughs. I've watched the scrimmage as well, the 11-on-11 sessions. Greenlaw's the one on and Alshire's the one off. But overall, when you talk about the linebackers, the most impressive thing, it's a thing that people don't necessarily realize always, and also attribute to Fred Warner being an all-pro, their ability to get into the gaps. Yesterday, we saw Oren Burks on the first play of scrimmage stop Elijah Mitchell for a 0-yard gain because he detected that Trent Williams was going to go to the second level, edge to the right, and then had a straight line to Elijah Mitchell. That's their ability. And the defense is just constructed in such a way that the offensive line has to deal with the defensive line, leaving the linebackers straight to punch the gap and get 0, 1, and 2-yard gains. That's a main reason why the running game, especially on the interior, at least on the 2 days on Monday and on yesterday, has struggled on the interior. You'll see a lot of 3, 2, 1, and 0-yard runs. Tuesday was a good day for the running game, but Monday and Wednesday, struggling on the interior.
The Niners are so strong at linebacker. I wouldn't be surprised if in a lot of situations they try to match up based with 3 wide receiver offenses.
I wouldn't be surprised either. But the only thing is, do you want your linebackers to be torched in that case? Because I don't know.
Man-to-man coverage. No, you'd play zone. You'd probably have to play zone, I guess. Yeah.
I guess. But I mean, the thing is, I've seen so much good man coverage that I don't want them to play zone as much. I mean, I'm not going to say that
you got to switch it up a little bit, but yeah, all of a sudden it seems like an aggressive man coverage team, right?
Yeah, definitely.
They weren't last year. They were very soft. Whatever they were doing, it was very soft. This year, I know we're not talking linebackers right now, but I like the idea. If you have that pass rush, would you try to force the quarterback into some low percentage throws, please?
Exactly.
And that's what they're doing to Trey Lance right now.
And the thing is, where did the Niners struggle on defense last year? Third downs. You saw it specifically in the Tennessee Titans game, where the Tennessee Titans just consistently converted on third downs, 3rd and 16, all these good throws. And Ryan Tannehill's a good quarterback. Don't get me wrong. But now when you're playing more aggressive, you're not allowing these soft coverage throws, and you're not allowing, like, the one thing that I've been a little disappointed on that the Niners kind of fixed in the second half. I had hope for Ambry Thomas. I know we're away from the secondary, but Ambry Thomas had been playing off so much in the first week where he was giving up 20-yard catch after 20-yard catch because he's playing off. So I wish that the Niners would play him on the press man, and unfortunately, he hasn't really been that consistent either in that field either. He's had good reps and bad reps, but I want more of this press man coverage because it's just gotten the best out of the defense overall, and it also will force the quarterback and Trey Lance to find this is the hardest way that he's going to have to learn, and I think it's a good sign.
Absolutely. Gizmo Maltese says teams will stack the box on Lance. They're preparing. That might be a mistake to go single high against Lance. I mean, he's really has no hesitation throwing down the field outside the numbers. I think he might struggle more against 2 high safety looks where he actually has to check down and execute. I'm just saying.
I think that's a good observation there. And I think even there he's improving because of how the Niners are debuting 2 safety looks as well. But overall, I think 1 safety looks isn't the best for Trey Lance. First of all, you don't know that the run game isn't a possibility. Second of all, you understand that Trey Lance has the capacity to do so. One thing that I've really been impressed is Lance he isn't getting flustered anymore. In the early parts, obviously, of like last season, you saw it. Lance looks faster, in my opinion, this year and last year. And it's not like something magically changed. It's because he's not hesitating anymore. When he has a lane, he takes off. When he needs to take off, he takes off. And he still makes the throws that he makes in general.
Yeah, and what's with him is like the Niners have been facing 8-man boxes, single high safeties forever. And Jimmy can't do anything about it. Trey can. If he's going to, I mean, they're going to run the ball so much, they're going to lead the league in rushing attempts most likely. You're going to have to play 8 in the box against the 49ers. And then when you do, Trey's going to have 3 or 4 or 5 shots a game. And if he hits 2 or 3 of them, it's the Russell Wilson effect. I mean, we saw this play out with the Seahawks 10 years ago. He doesn't have to be the best quarterback in the league, but the run game is going to be so good that teams are going to have to sell out to stop it. And there's going to be opportunities off play action to go down the field that Jimmy wouldn't take.
Yeah, exactly.
So we'll see. All right, let's talk defensive line.
All right. I mean, first of all, I want to get your opinion on one player because I've seen it and it's been an interesting story because the one-on-ones and the actual scrimmage has told a different story to me. Drake Jackson, what are you thinking about him?
Drake Jackson is the most interesting man on the defensive line. He is the Dos Equis of the 49ers defensive line. Okay, so when they took him, I was so confused. It's like, you don't have a first-round pick. You have legitimate needs on your roster, and you take another player at your deepest position. Now, I get that you can't have enough edge rushers, but wow, I didn't get it. And then I saw him in person. I was even more confused because he doesn't look like an edge rusher. He looks like a tweener.
Yeah.
He straight up looks like a tweener. And then talking to Chris Kasarik today, it like all clicked. I was like, well, first of all, you've seen him take reps at D tackle. You've seen
Correct.
Him.
I have.
So I asked Chris Kasarik, like, what about his skill set makes you feel like he'll excel there? And he's like, well, he reminds us a lot of Arden Key. Straight up. He's like, he's got the bend, but he's like in the interior, he's got the wiggle. So to me, it's like, oh, Arden Key was a very important part of this defense. When that defense clicked, he was a very important part. They lost him. Clearly they want to replace him. And what he said was, that freshman year of Drake Jackson at USC, when he got most of his sacks, mostly came from the interior. So I'm guessing that while they're teaching him how to play defensive end right now, it's what they did with Key last year. His role when the season comes around will be the interior third down rusher. I'm guessing. What do you see from Drake Jackson?
Now, that's interesting. A very interesting observation. Originally, I had heard before training camp had started that the 49ers wanted to implement Jackson as a true edge rusher because of that bend, right? Because in the interior, the one difference I feel in the interior as opposed to out, the quickness definitely is helpful against guards, but you also need a little more of a pass rush acumen, meaning a couple of pass rush moves to get past a guy, whereas across the edge, you don't have a guy next to you. You can just beat him with speed through the edge. And I've seen both. The one obviously interesting thing with Drake Jackson, if you pair him alongside Nick Bosa, that's really, I don't see a way that defenses can stop it if it's one-on-one, because Drake Jackson has that ability. And in one-on-ones, the reason that it's interesting is because he hasn't necessarily won. Justin Skule had a good rep against him. Colton McKivitz had a good rep against him. He hasn't won, which shows to me that he's still raw with his pass rush acumen. But overall, I think his traits are just too undeniable that you still can justify keeping him on the field because he's going to make an impact. On Tuesday was his best practice. 4 pressures, 2 sacks against Alfredo Gutierrez. I want to see him get more reps against the ones. And I mean, it is against backups, right? But he got reps against the ones yesterday, was on the edge, and beat Mike McGlinchey for a pressure. And this Mike McGlinchey has looked good so far too. Yeah,
I think what's intriguing about Drake Jackson isn't that he's necessarily Arden Key, who was a straight up flop on the edge and resurrected his career on the interior. I think with Drake Jackson, he probably is going to be able to do both, or ideally. I think that's what the projection is. But as a rookie, I think there's a role for him in that Arden Key role that I think he could take pretty quickly. Because if it's not him, who is it?
Yeah, I mean, the only 2 guys right now that can really fulfill that role, in my opinion at least, are Charles Omenahu and him. Those are the only 2 guys.
The guy asked about Omenahu earlier, right? So what do you see from him?
Yeah, so Omenahu has been interesting. So obviously the 49ers have had some fair share of injuries, right? Yesterday was a little bit of the most telling day because Nick Bosa was out. Who's going to start there? It was Charles Omenahu. Charles Omenahu took the first team snaps at the end position. The only other guy really that I saw taking a bunch of the first team snaps, like a significant portion, was Kerry Hyder, which is interesting. And Omenahu's name hasn't necessarily flashed a lot, but you can understand why they want him to do it. His length. His length is something different to me. Like that's something that's unique to him. And I can see him taking that Arden Key role as well, just because he is a little more refined in pass rush technique, where Jackson can win against the Jackson. Obviously, his traits help him against the edge rush. So that's the one thing about Omenahu versus Drake Jackson. I can see Omenahu taking a role, and also he's year 2 in the system. Jackson's year 1 in the system. Omenahu says he's been more comfortable, and obviously the reports. I think he is in a way primed for a season where at least he'll be given the opportunity to break out because he'll be given reps early.
Yeah, I feel like what Omenahu is sort of like maybe the projection for Drake Jackson, kind of similar, maybe a guy who can do both, not necessarily only one or the other. So yeah, Bose looks great. Armstead's hurt. Kinlaw's back. Hasn't played that much. Hasn't been in one-on-ones yet. What have you seen from him as a pass rusher in 11-on-11?
Good. I think it's been fine, and by good I mean potential.
Okay.
Yesterday was Kinlaw. Like Kinlaw necessarily didn't have his best performance yesterday, but yesterday was the most promising day because of the amount of snaps he played. Kinlaw played a majority of the ones. He played a majority of the snaps of the ones. On the other day that he played in the defensive drills, what was that? Was that I forget which day. I think it was Saturday. The day he just came back because he got the day off on Monday. On Saturday when he came back and when he was playing, he didn't play a majority with the ones, but you could see the pressure. He literally moved away Jake Brendel on one of the first snaps of the day. And then Aaron Banks was in a position and he pushed him back and got like pretty much a sack or something like that on one of the plays. So he's looked promising. It's just, can he remain durable and can he continue to kind of get these number 1 reps and stay with the first team defense on the field?
It's funny, unprompted. Chris Kasarik, D'Amico Ryans, the last 2 days talked about Javon Kinlaw. Both said, with him, it's all about technique, pad level technique, all that hand placement. Like basically, to me, what they're saying is he has the ability to be just like Eric Armstead, to do all the things Eric Armstead does, but that requires great level of technique because for Armstead, he's 6'7", and he gets his pads low and he forklifts people and generates tremendous knockback. Javon, like sometimes he does that. Sometimes, and like you see it a lot, that pick 6, great play. Yeah. But at the same time, like you are on the other side of the line of scrimmage. You should be knocking guards back. You that kind of guy. And a lot of times you'll see him get stonewalled because his pads go up and then he's like trying to knock passes down. So I think they're trying to get him in the backfield more. So we'll see.
And the one other thing real quick about Javon Kinlaw, you talk about the one-on-one reps. That's where I'm really because he hasn't had one-on-one reps. COVID year was there. Then last year they took him out of the one-on-one reps because he was like still with the injury concerns and that kind of thing. They didn't really let him play in one-on-one reps as much. He hasn't been too much of a pass rusher yet. That's the one thing I want to see. And he has the potential to do it, but the best way to really showcase that talent is in one-on-one reps. So I want to see Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Will he be in there? Will McGlinchey be in there? And those guys be in there because they haven't been yet.
That's the big catch-22 with Kinlaw. Like he has the talent. He just needs the technique. Well, how do you work on the technique? Practice. Yeah. So he needs to be in practice all the time. If he could be in every day of training camp, I would bet on him to have a very successful season. We don't know how the next month's going to play out, but he needs practice.
And it's not like I don't think you're blaming Kinlaw either. It's the Niners, right? The Niners are the ones really that are the ones like controlling the schedule. It's just you want to see him more there and get the most reps possible because you see what kind of a person he is, the talent and everything there.
Yeah, and I don't want to say that the Niners are mismanaging him because it's a catch-22.
It's a big injury.
You got to manage the knee, so you don't want to have him have a setback. So it's like, what's the right balance between workload and practice? Yeah. It's tough. We'll see if they can figure it out. Let's go to a couple questions. What odds that Jimmy's on the SF roster week 1? What do you think, Rohan?
So I know we've actually, I called in and we talked about this a little bit ago.
Yes.
I'm personally, okay, I can't say 0 because I've been proven wrong before. I'll say 15. I still think that Jimmy Garoppolo will not be on this roster via, be it via trade, be it via release. But I still, I think you got to preface that with Garoppolo is going to end up going where he wants to go. And what do I mean by that? His contract is not going to be valid regardless of what it is. He's going to make less money than whatever he's making right now with the 24, 27 million. So right now, in my eyes, Garoppolo is a free agent. What do I mean by that? He's free to negotiate deals with other teams. And once he agrees to a negotiated deal, it's a sign and trade. You give back an asset, we take we'll trade for Garoppolo in that kind of way. And so that's why
Is this negotiated deal going to be multi-year, or is it just going to be like, hey man, like we're going to trade for you, cut you, and give you $7 million? Like
that is very interesting because I know Jimmy is definitely going to want 2 years, right? Because that gives you more guaranteed money. Yeah. No team is going to want to trade for an injured quarterback and give him an extension because that thwarts their final. Like the whole point of a bridge quarterback is so that you can get away from 1 year. And I know I broke the story with Marco about Jimmy Garoppolo to the New York Giants. The one thing about it is Tyrod Taylor is their bridge quarterback. If you look at Tyrod Taylor's contract, it's a 2-year deal, but you move off of it after 1 year. That's the point of a bridge quarterback. So maybe it's structured in that way where you can move off very easily after 1 year. But I think that it's likely still would be a 1 year deal for the team's benefit.
It seems to me like the Niners are kind of just waiting to see the whole Deshaun Watson situation through, because there is a possibility that the league extends the suspension. He's out the whole year, and the Browns call him up. But It seems like still kind of a low possibility. And barring that, what do they do other than cut him?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, regardless, I still think like the one thing about the Niners holding on to Garoppolo, I don't think it hurts the Niners. I think it hurts Garoppolo more because that every day that he doesn't spend in another team's training camp learning another team's playbook is another day that goes to waste for him. He needs to get in there, get reps with the ones, get reps with his offensive line, find out the tendencies, and learn the playbook all before week 1 if he really wants to be a starting quarterback. Because if not, then it doesn't even matter. His playing time is going to be dependent on another quarterback failing, because otherwise, if the quarterback's doing good, you're not going to just trade for Garoppolo and just put him in because you paid him money. If a guy's doing good, you're playing the guy who's doing good.
Jim, thanks for becoming a member. DM me. I'll give you a 10% off promo code for my merchandise. Miguel says, are the Niners wasting their time on Gutierrez? What do you think?
I mean, no, because he's just a practice squad guy. He's like that exception to me. I forget exactly the terminology, but since he's with the Pathways program, there's an extra spot on the practice squad. Exactly. So guys, just imagine that he's not on the roster really. So to me, it's not a waste. But yeah.
Also, he won 2 reps in one-on-ones. He beat Robert Kimbiche twice.
He did. He struggles in the scrimmage, but he did win the reps on one-on-ones. He's just not really that refined in pass protection.
Greg says, you're the man, Rohan. What's your channel name?
When this comment goes away, it's literally just my name. You can just search it up on YouTube and you'll see it. Rohan Chakravati right there. You just figure it out and subscribe. Thank you.
Ricardo says, what's up, Grant? Out of 3-4 off seasons I've watched your coverage, this has been your most enthusiastic field of the team. And you don't have them in the playoffs. Why is that? Because I haven't watched Jimmy Garoppolo throw one pass. I was tired of it. I had seen enough. Sorry. It's like watching the same TV show. I don't want to watch season 9. The last 6 were exactly the same. I'm done. So it's a new show. It's a lot of fun. That's basically how I feel.
I saw you tweet, go home. I saw you tweet, go home.
Why are you hanging out with the kids? It's not your team anymore. It's like you got Trey Lance getting his brains beaten in by the best defense in the league, and Jimmy Garoppolo here posing for pictures don't you wish I was still out there? Don't you wish? Come on, man. Go away. It's not his fault, though, right? The Niners are creating that situation. Yeah. Have they been working on Trey's slide? No. I've never.
They don't even allow him to tackle. They don't allow to tackle him. If somebody tried to tackle him, it'd likely be Robert Nikomdiche, and he'd be cut the next day. So they definitely cannot do that.
Doesn't Jimmy G need to know the playbook, YOLO? Yeah, I think he knows it. He should know it.
Yeah. I mean, if you're talking about a trade, you definitely do need to know the playbook of the team that you're going to.
Okay. Let's talk offense. What are you seeing from the offensive line? This is a hot topic.
Yeah. So, I mean, we talk about the offensive line. I don't know if you're optimistic or pessimistic about it. I personally am a little more optimistic, although the point is it's too early to tell for me. When you talk about the offensive line, they've had a couple of good days. First week was not great, obviously. No pads. And yesterday was a no padded day. To me, I'm not necessarily
2 days in pads.
Yeah. To me, it's not that I'm worried as much about the offensive line, but there are a couple of things that I've been stressing. First of all, the point is cohesion. the 49ers continuously swap their centers, Jake Brendel and Daniel Brunskill. Brunskill had a great practice on Tuesday. I thought he was the better center by far on Tuesday with a number of run blocks and pass protection as well. And then they went to Jake Brendel on Wednesday. I thought Brunskill, who had taken a majority of the snaps on Tuesday, would be the center after that because obviously that was the first day he started, and he hadn't necessarily started before, even though he got a majority in the reps on Saturday. And then they went to Brendel again. So to me, the point that I've been talking about on the offensive line, specifically at center, the guards, they're rookies, at least in terms of playing time.
Right.
Not only are they trying to get acclimated to the tackles who are interchanging because McGlinchey and Williams have been limited at times, they have to get especially in the zone read offense where it's a bunch of rushing into the interior, you have to get acclimated to the center as well. And when it's continuously changing, when both of them have different tendencies, both in pass protection and run blocking, it's hard to develop some sustainability, and it's hard to really see what this offensive line could be. But in the short time that I've seen him, I've seen a couple of good runs. That was on Tuesday. You saw the running game finally explode, not only on the outside, but also on the inside for 5-6 yard gains. The protection also seemed like it was the best by far on Tuesday. And that was without Mike McGlinchey there, who, in my opinion, has had a fine camp to start.
Okay. Interesting. So what I've noticed is that they want Brendel to have that job, I think. Talking to Chris Forster today, he's really hyping up Brendel. He's like, I mean, he knows he's so smart. And I mean, he his athletic testing, he compared him to Creed Humphreys, Rohan. He's like, I'm not saying he's Creed Humphreys or anything, but I mean, you compare him. It's like, so, and then he's like, and then you have Daniel Brunskill, who really isn't off the charts, but he finds ways to get people blocked. I think they want Daniel Brunskill to be there, do everything backup.
Correct.
I don't know if that's going to end up being what happens, but I don't know that they have a starting center. I think they're wondering too. I think they like.
Go ahead. Oh, my bad. I didn't mean to cut you off, but real quick, I was actually you talking about Brendel might be the backup on the team. They carried 8 offensive linemen last year. I was actually talking about this just an hour ago. An interesting thing that they might do. We'll get to the position in a minute. They might only carry 2 tight ends on this roster. Have Kyle Juszczyk potentially be that third tight end, and carry an extra offensive lineman because they didn't carry a center last year. Brendel was on the practice squad, although he was elevated every game. They might carry Brendel as that guy because there's no backup center on this team right now that's at least somewhat NFL caliber.
I forgot that. So he was not on the team, but he was on the team. He was practice squad, elevated every game. That's how they handled backup center last year.
Yeah.
They do it again this year. Again, I'm not sure they have a center on this team. Okay, so hold on. Burford looks good. To me, I thought he won reps. He wasn't going to get starters, but in the one-on-ones, he looked good. Banks struggled. He went up against Alex Barrett and got punked a little bit by a vet, at least from what I saw. He got put him on skates. That was just one day, though. What have you seen from Banks in the 11-on-11s?
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about Banks, it's very interesting, at least. When you 11-on-11s, in my opinion, at least, has been a different story than the one-on-ones. In the one-on-ones, he struggled to anchor. I don't know if you've seen that or not. He struggled to anchor. And what do I mean by that? He struggled to hold up against a power rush. No matter the player that's opposite of him, he gets pushed back a lot. And unlike Daniel Brunskill, who sometimes struggles in the initial part, but anchors up and holds 2 yards back, holds up 2 yards after, Banks has sometimes struggled in that case. I know you talked about the Alex Barrett rep, but in the 11-on-11s, he's honestly looked pretty good because he's been going up against certain players. There was one day in my opinion where he looked pretty bad. That was a day where he continuously just got beat by Kevin Givens. I think there were 3 pressures by Givens on the day.
That's a tough matchup for Banks because, again, Givens is low to the ground. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's a good challenge, right? And then when you talk about, when you talk about the rest of the days, I thought Banks has looked fine. I honestly thought he was solid in the run game, and you don't necessarily always see it. But when you see the left side and the running lanes open up, especially towards the interior, it's a nice sight. And I think Burford, it's like both have been inconsistent. I think they've had good days. They've also had days where they've been beaten before. Burford had his best day of camp, in my opinion, yesterday in the 11-on-11 session, especially because you saw the run game materialize on the right side a little more, meaning right side inside zone a little more. But Banks, in my opinion, has been promising. He had a strong start to camp compared to the rest of the linemen, but also the rest of the linemen weren't great. And then he's had up and down days. I think he's inconsistent, but I think he has shown signs for optimism in 11-on-11s.
All right, before we move on, I want to talk about McGlinchey for a second. He's a tough read. He is a solid player. He has weight fluctuation things.
Correct.
And when he's lighter, he's a better run blocker.
Correct.
When he's bigger, he's a better pass protector, and it's a trade-off. Last year he was big, and I thought he was not as good of a run blocker. I thought their running game improved with Compton, he was atrocious in pass protection, Tom Compton. So I'm just curious, like, where is Mike McGlinchey on his spectrum of body types? To me, he looks like he's on the lighter side. So we haven't seen him in one-on-ones, and I want to see, like, how do you do against power? How do you do against power? That's what I want to see.
I think Mike McGlinchey, that's a good observation. He is lighter. He definitely is lighter than last year, and he talked about it on the live stream, talking about how he wanted to get lighter and how he tried to get heavier, and it ruined, like it kind of led to his injury because of the regimen that he was doing. I personally think he's looked a little better right now because he's lighter. Saturday, really rough practice, right? That was the first day he was in team drills, first day he was in 11-on-11s, and who does he see right opposite of him? Nick Bosa. Bosa just schooled him on Saturday, right? He got a sack on the play, and then McGlinchey on the next rep just couldn't hold up and held him, held him to the ground. And but on Monday, McGlinchey had a good day. McGlinchey was paired against Bosa 4 times, from what I saw, and he only gave up 1 pressure on the 4, and that was just on a really good move by Bosa. Faked outside, cut inside, and beat him. But on the other 3 reps, McGlinchey held up, and that allowed pass protection to be pretty solid on the day. And obviously, McGlinchey wasn't there on Tuesday when the 49ers had a pretty nice offensive line. To me, I think McGlinchey is looking better. The one question I have with his with a smaller frame, is he going to be durable? Because obviously he's coming off this injury. He's a little lighter. You talked about how he might get bull rushed a little more, and that's something that he might have to work on. His footwork seems a little more improved this year, but can he remain durable? Because right now, I don't think the 49ers have a right tackle that I'd be at all comfortable with. Maybe Colton McKivitz, because he's looked good at sometimes, but not really for the majority of times.
Not Jalen Moore.
Not Jalen Moore. With all due, I actually had high hopes, but Jalen Moore is a guard.
Guard.
Please play Jalen Moore at guard.
Guard.
Play Jalen Moore at guard. But
okay, real quick, before we move on to the next position group, is this going to be a good offensive line, an average offensive line, or a bad offensive line?
I'd think average.
Okay. I think Chris Forster today was like, I don't know. It's going to be one of the 3. Like, yeah, it definitely will be. What do you think? Average?
Average. I'm assuming this line ranks around the 15th-ish range. And as surprising it may sound, this line honestly might be the best in the division, which is very, very funny. But the Rams offensive line.
What about Arizona?
I don't know because it's a little older.
Hudson's getting a little older.
Hudson's older.
Pugh's older.
Pugh is older. Like I know a lot of people like DJ Humphries. I'm not as high on DJ Humphries, and he just got a bag the other day. And then the other guy is Kelvin Beachum on the right side, who's average. So I still think this is better just because we have more top tier talent overall. So making it better, but I think that's the one competition.
It would just be helpful if they could get a center. Okay, moving on. Official BNA Music 88 says after 2 off seasons with Trey, Banana Hands has no excuse to call a game like he did against Arizona as if we were at Georgia Tech or Navy. If I will riot, if so. Yeah, I agree. And they haven't been calling stuff like that in camp so far, so there's hope. All right, tight ends. You think there's a possibility the Niners keep only 2?
Yeah. I mean, it's at least it's an idea because there's so much depth. And if we're being honest, the second best tight end in camp just got injured and he's out for the year. Jordan Matthews, in my opinion, at least, looked like the second best tight end in camp for the first week of practice.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, now he's out with the torn ACL. And yesterday was the first day where I really, really looked like it's not the first day, but I looked closer to the tight ends than before because George Kittle wasn't there. That was a day where tight ends could separate themselves potentially. Tanner Hudson had 3 targets. Nobody else had a target in the 11-on-11s. I know you love Dwelly, but Hudson had 3 targets. And
they never target Ross Dwelly ever. So yeah, I mean, what's the point? It's like he's on the team to play special teams or something. Like that's not why I like him. I like him because of the one-on-ones.
He does do good in one-on-ones, which is surprising. He's won 4 straight one-on-ones.
Just to give Jaquaski Tart the business. I don't care. Jaquaski, you know I'm right.
But talking about Tanner Hudson, he had a good day yesterday in 3 targets, but on the 25-yard catch, he made a really good catch over, it was either Thomas or Odom.
Ball. And then he got stripped by Leon O'Neal Jr.
A career ball. And then as he turns around, he just drops it. Like,
oh, no, Leon O'Neal hit it. Leon O'Neal hit it out.
But I'm expecting him to hold on to that ball, at least go out of bounds or something like that. Instead, so that was the thing.
To me, that's a drop and a PBU. We were talking earlier on the spaces.
I did.
That's a drop.
I did count that one as a drop. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. Charlie
Yeah.
Warner's been hurt all offseason. So what
Mhm.
they could do is they could have two tight ends, call up a third on game days from practice squad, and then bring back Charlie Warner when he's eventually available. So I don't think, can they put Ross Dwelly on the practice squad? I don't know.
No,
But
he is a veteran though, right? So you
yes.
don't necessarily have to like the new practice squad rules are you can keep a couple more veterans on the roster, and he has more. I think he has more than 4 years of accrued service, if I'm not mistaken.
He
I
might.
think
He
so.
might.
It's either his
Yeah.
fourth year or he has more than 4, and if he
Yeah.
does, he doesn't go through waivers.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the tight end spot. It's basically George Kittle and a bunch of other people who are doing nothing in camp. Sorry to Jordan Matthews. Real quick before we move on, what's your impression of George Kittle? As in, is he the same George Kittle he was at his peak?
I think he's just growing with Trey Lance. I think it's still like you see a lot of targets to George Kittle. I think he's been one of the more consistent 49er players, but I think it's still also a little apparent that them two are working on their connection together. Like he's one of the guys, in my opinion, that is going to have to kind of adapt to the new situation. He obviously got a bunch of targets with Jimmy. That's where he got his 1,377 yard season back in 2018. But I think he's one of the guys who will have to kind of acclimate now to Trey Lance and the different style of quarterback play, because the one place where Trey Lance in a way has struggled initially is the intermediate passing. He's thrown passes behind receivers at times, intermediate wise. And so he might not target that place as much. So where you've seen George Kittle work is the deeper, like that 20-yard kind of range. And so that's where a bunch of his catches have come from. But I don't know if that's where the 49ers are going to play him 24/7 instead of having that intermediate soft blanket range where he might not receive as many targets because that's just not Lance's game.
Yeah. I mean, so many of his targets were on the dig route, which is probably the most dangerous throw to ask Lance to make right now because he could miss wildly.
Yeah.
Do we have one more thing? No. All right, moving on. Running backs. What are you seeing from this group? It's a hard group to analyze in training camp, but still, Rohan's good. And real quick, before we go, if we've gone 45 minutes, if you weren't here at the beginning, if you've never seen Rohan before, he writes for 49ers Web Zone, and he's been at every single practice. So I just wanted to point that out. He's seen everything I've seen. Rohan, what have you seen from the running backs?
Running backs, interesting group, obviously without pads. And I yesterday kind of changed my outlook, because before yesterday, I kind of had a clear indication of who the 49ers at least thought were competing for those top spots. Before yesterday, it was Mitchell at the 1. Mitchell has been a clear-cut 1 all camp. That's like, that is like, he's up there. Trey Sermon, though, was seeming like the 2 before yesterday, with TDP being the 3. He got 1 first-team carry or 2 first-team carries on Tuesday, that was, and then didn't get any yesterday. And then Mason and Hasty battling for 4 because Wilson was out with that undisclosed injury for a couple of days. Yeah, whatever it was. And then Mason was looking good. I had him above Hasty just because he's been a little bit of a better player, which we can explain in a minute. But yesterday, Jeff Wilson comes back in the mix and he's getting first-team snaps. It's him, Sermon, and it's Elijah Mitchell. To me, Wilson did have a good practice yesterday, putting him back in the mix. But last week when we saw Wilson, he looked less explosive. He looked slower, in my opinion. And his biggest trait, at least his biggest selling point for this team, is his catching ability, because the 49ers need a receiving running back. You saw yesterday how Elijah Mitchell dropped a 4-yard pass in the flat, which was right to him. It just bounced off. I think it was his hands or his chest. Yeah, it bounced off his chest.
It should have hit him in the hands. It went through the hands, hit him in the chin. It was bad.
And then the other guy that kind of his biggest selling point is receiving is Jermichael Hasty. And I've been watching one-on-ones. I want Hasty to make somewhat of a difficult catch. He was up against Fred Warner the other day, and the ball was really nice from Brock Purdy. And it also, it was going to be a difficult catch, but it just bounced off Hasty's chest. So, like, to me, the most consistent receiver so far has been Jordan Mason. And because he's younger and been the better receiver so far, I'd put him over Jeff Wilson Jr. Also,
he's the new Jeff Wilson Jr., Jordan Mason.
He is. He's just
the new Jeff Wilson Jr.
He's the more
Jeff Wilson the third.
Yeah, he is. He is. I personally like him. I think he's honestly even been better than some of the other running backs just because he's a little more consistent. It's just he doesn't get as much playing time. And TDP had his best practice, I think, yesterday. He's had a strong practice and a half. He was slow on Tuesday to start, finished really strong, especially with that 15-yard screenplay that he had where he was weaving pretty nice. And then yesterday, the one play that really stuck out to me, he got the ball and he burst to the edge and he beat it was the linebacker in coverage.
That's what stood out to me is he actually turned the corner, and no one on this team can do that other than Debo. Do you think he can do that? Do you think that's going to be something he can bring to the offense?
I want to see more again because it hasn't been a part of his game in college, at least. That wasn't necessarily a part of his game, but he has burst, right? It's not necessarily he has top end speed, but he has burst in my opinion, at least. Mitchell seems like a little bit of a better, he seems a little more primed for that role because the other guys just excel on the interior. I think Mitchell will be the primary outside zone guy. And because the 49ers run that a lot, I think he'll get a lot of carries. But I think TDP, I think Trey Sermon, and I think even Jordan Mason are all going to get rushes towards the interior.
The Niners need to be deep at running back because they've invested a lot in the position. They're a run first team. They get injuries at this position. Everyone does. That being said, my guess for the carry breakdown week 1 is 21 for Mitchell, 20 for Mitchell, 20 for Mitchell, 8 for Lance, 3 for Debo. What do you think? That's it. 1 for McLeod.
I'll disagree a little bit. The reason being, last week, what did we see in week 2? Elijah Mitchell got he got 17 carries and he was banged up really, really close to the beginning of the season. I don't think they want to start him that high, especially because he bulked up, but he's finally dealing with how his playing weight will be. And I think they want to ramp it up a little bit. I don't think he's going to be the 20 carry back for the year because the 49ers realized last year, if you're doing that, Elijah Mitchell is going to be sitting out the games for 6 games. And I think it's more important at least to have Elijah Mitchell in 17 games and have his ability because he's the one kind of differentiator apart from Debo Samuel in that he can rush to the edge a lot. I know Davis Price had that 1 rep, but I think he and Samuel are more consistent. And I think the 49er run game becomes a lot more limited if he's injured for 6 games. So I'd rather have him run 10 times every game, but be able to stretch the defense when you rush the outside for 17 games as opposed to 6. So I think there will be a little more of a balance. I don't know if Debo also gets 8 carries in week 1. That's the interesting part.
No, I said Lance.
Debo
Lance. 3 or 4. Lance, I think he's going to have Lance
because
3 or 4 scrambles.
A lot of scrambles, right? Yeah, I could see it.
Edgardo Rodriguez says, do we address kick returner? Well, Ray, Danny Gray, what do you see?
Yeah, it's actually interesting because I've actually written down, I've seen who's been returning punts. There have been 4 players, and it might honestly give a little bit of an indication, or 5. Indication of who could be receiver number 6. And I know it's not that big of a point to hit, but McLeod has been the guy, and then McLeod was out. So there were a couple of other guys. You saw Danny Gray in there, like you said. You saw Keyshawn Marcus Johnson and then Malik Turner in there. So those 3 guys obviously battling for receiver 6. Malik Turner, in my opinion, right now seems like he's got the edge on them, with Tay Martin probably at number 2 because that release package is just nasty. But overall, kick returner, probably going to be McLeod, and I hope that they split them. I don't think McLeod should get kick and punt, and I don't think Gray should get kick and punt. Split them 1 and 1. They both have had fumble issues in the past. Let them hone in on one thing and be consistent with that one thing rather than having too much on their plate.
I like it. Ben Myerson Football says dynamic duo, 50K grant. Thanks, Ben. August 4th.
Yeah, man. Congrats on 50K, man. That's
Appreciate
crazy.
It. Appreciate it. It's August 4th, and Jimmy, what is Jimmy?
Tell me. I'm not going to say it.
I would. Don't ruin my day. Okay, let's talk about the wide receivers.
Yeah,
Debo just showed up. I'd like to know your impression of him, like where he's at with his body and fitness. Also, Ayuk's been a big headline. What do you see from him?
Yeah, so I mean, we talk about Debo first. About his fitness. I think his fitness is fine at the moment for the reason I saw one play and it kind of told me. That was the screen pass on Tuesday where you saw the explosiveness be there and he was just able to run through everybody for 15 yards. Now, yesterday was a really different practice for Debo Samuel. He doesn't seem right now on the same page as Trey Lance. There was the first throw was a beautiful throw by Trey Lance, that 40-yard bomb. And it was to Debo Samuel. It was over the left shoulder. Emmanuel Mosley was tailing him right on the right shoulder. It was over the left shoulder, and Debo Samuel just dropped it. Again, I think I attribute it a little more to rust at this point, but you also have to indicate that Debo Samuel had a drop issue last year. I'm not gonna say anything. It's freaking preseason and training camp and things like that. But overall, like when you talk about Debo Samuel, right? You want to see that connection build. the one thing that I'll say that's optimism, that gives optimism, Brandon Ayuk and Trey Lance did not look that great on day 1 and day 2. Ayuk struggled initially to win against the top 2 cornerbacks. Instead, he was winning against every other cornerback and catching passes from Sudfeld. But after that, you've seen how Ayuk has been. The last 4 practices, he's been the best offensive player on the field. And so I'm hoping you see somewhat of a learning curve like that for Samuel, because these players just turn it around fast. But then I want to see your thoughts on Debo first, and then we'll go to Brandon Ayuk.
Debo's hard to judge because he wears that T-shirt. He wears that long sleeve shirt to practice.
You noticed it too? Yeah.
Yeah, it's because he just got paid like AJ Brown and DK Metcalf. Those guys are always trying to show you how ripped they are, and Debo's like, "Don't look at my body, please." It's like, really? You just got 60 million guaranteed, so it's hard to tell. I'm not going to judge. I mean, he looked like I was surprised he couldn't pull away from Emmanuel Mosley on that one play. That whole practice yesterday, I thought was kind of like, dude, you're the best player on the field. You should show that every day. What are you doing, man?
Yeah. And the one thing that I'll say about that, like we talked about the connection right now, I still think maybe he's trying to master that route run to see because them two were working together on Monday when Samuel was first out on the deep throws in warmups. Debo and Trey Trey was telling him where to go, and then they were practicing during warmup. So maybe he's trying to master where exactly he wants to be and didn't focus too much. Maybe it's that. But then again, like you said, it was a little surprising.
It's too early to tell with Debo. With Ayuk, though, he's been consistent every day. And so far, like, we're learning that he's become like this contested catch god. Like, he extends for some crazy catches. What do you see from his game in year 3?
Ayuk has been phenomenal. And this is like, we talk about Javon Kinlaw a lot when we talk about hasn't had an offseason. Ayuk hasn't had a real offseason yet either. Last year, he thought probably it was going to be a lot like the COVID offseason. It wasn't. And then he was in the doghouse in a way for the first 6 weeks, and where he wasn't, he just wasn't getting enough snaps, right? And then when he got snaps, he wasn't getting targeted because the quarterbacks had already ran through install with other players and were looking at other players, even if they were more covered. So then now Ayuk, really different mentality. He's not a vocal guy. Trey Lance said it, but you've seen him take a bit of a leadership role in this offense. You saw it with the fight.
He just fought Fred Warner. So yeah, I think he's sort of coming out of his shell. Yeah. Yeah.
But Ayuk overall, great. He's dominated everybody over the last 4 days of practice. One-on-ones, he beat Tarvarius Ward. He beat Jimmy Ward twice. He's continuously won against everybody. And that's like the difference. Because you know that if you know that he can win against those guys, you know that he can win against anybody really, especially lower level cornerbacks. And his contested catch ability and ability to keep 2 feet in bounds every single time is just phenomenal.
Another guy who, to me, at least struggled big time in 11 on 11s the last 3 days was Juwan Jennings. He didn't have any catches. I didn't see all the one-on-one reps. What are you seeing from him? I mean, it's a tough
one-on-one reps. And it's unfortunate because Juwan Jennings has continuously beaten cornerbacks in one-on-ones and just drops the pass.
Yeah.
Like, you've seen it twice. Yesterday, it was against Samuel Womack. He just beat him with a really nice route. And then on the other day, it was Tarvarius Ward. He beat him on a route. It was the exact same location. It was the left hash near the end zone. And he just dropped the ball with a bucket type of catch, and he just dropped it. And so maybe it's concentration. I don't know about that. But Jennings was you thought it was going to be a really good camp after the first couple of days because he was getting targeted 4 or 5 times a day. And then over the last 4 days or 3 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, he's been really quiet. You don't see targets much. And the most important thing is he's forgotten to, like, it's not that he's forgotten. He just failed to get in separation, hence the coverage sacks that we mentioned earlier. It's like, and it's not a big part of his game, right? He's not necessarily like a huge separator. But when you're not catching the ball, when you're a contested catch it guy, and also not necessarily winning against cornerbacks, like, where's the confidence to throw him the ball in that kind of range?
Yeah. With Ray, I've had a tough time judging. I feel like he was limping through 2 practices and then he wasn't out there. I think he's hurt. So I don't even know.
Yeah, he was out there. He finally got out there yesterday, right? After not being there the days before. Ray, I think, like, I won't say it. I still think Juwan he's going to be reliable as a slot 3 when he's going to be on the field in regular season, because you saw what he did last year, but Ray he's like a gadget guy. He's been used in so many different roles. It's interesting. He's used, like, the first 2 days of training camp, I was like, oh, this guy's a check down guy. Because that's what I heard in minicamp as well. Right. This guy's a check down guy. You just let him run after the catch. And now he's running from the slot. He's running out routes. He's running 20-yard routes. He's running 10-yard routes. he's looked fine. He's looked good. He hasn't necessarily run too much on one-on-ones, but he's also been held. He's like he's like that underrated, like just guy that he's so small in a way, but he's also just so swift and fluid. I hope he gets a bigger role, but I don't know what the 49ers plans are so far.
You said he's so small in a way. I was going to say he's the smallest wide receiver I've ever seen. Ever.
Yeah,
He's the littlest wide receiver I've ever seen in my whole life.
Which is why you can understand the fumble issues, right? Because he's that small.
He's that small. Yes. Nees says, great job, Rohan. Very informative. Outside tackles got worked out today. Maybe more bodies so more McKivitz can get.
They were in for a workout. Okay, I'll figure out who that was. That's cool.
Good to know. Good to know. Okay, you guys have been waiting for an hour. It's time to talk quarterbacks. Let's talk Trey Lance. We can talk about Nate Sudfeld and Brock Purdy a little bit at the end, but they don't matter. Trey Lance completing 50% of his throws. We talked about this on Spaces. There's a debate as to how many drops there have been. But what's more relevant is the fact that it seems like he's putting the ball on receivers' hands a lot more often than that completion percentage would indicate. What are you seeing from Lance?
When you talk about Trey Lance, it was a little bit of a surprise. I didn't think it was going to be like this. The accuracy deep is something that really has surprised me. He's been very accurate deep. And by very accurate, if you're 50% completion percentage going
that's
deep,
very accurate.
That's very good.
Yes.
And Trey Lance
40%. I think they want like 44% ish,
somewhere around 44. So if you're 50%, that's good. I haven't updated the numbers, but I know after day 4 he was 6 of 12 and then 8 of 15 after day 5. So he has been above 53%, barring the last 2 days. Yesterday was the one off day that I've seen deep. But Trey Lance has consistently been able to hit receivers deep. And while the completion, I don't even care about the completion percentage. The accuracy on the throws are there. Like I remember the one day I continuously point to, day 2, one of the bigger install days, he was 6 of 14. That's horrible. But then when you look at it, 3 of those throws were deep and on the money. One to Brandon Ayuk, where Emmanuel Mosley got the PBU. He pinned him to the sideline. Ayuk tried to keep 2 feet in, and then Mosley hit the ball out. Then Jawan Jennings on the right side against Tarvarius Moore. Right. Jennings tried to corral it.
And he hit him in the shoulder. Yeah.
It did. It did. Yep. I thought it was a good play by the defense. I called that a PBU, but you could see.
Oh, great catch. Great catch. But really, the ball placement couldn't have been better.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then the third one was the McLeod one where Hufanga got the PBU on there. So like overall, it's been a couple of good plays. Really a couple of good throws. And Trey Lance's deep accuracy has me thinking the 49ers install is not going to change. But when you see the throws, I know there's a compilation out there where Brandon Ayuk is consistently open deep and Jimmy just doesn't throw it, even though he's the earlier read. You're going to see those throws be a lot more attempted because Lance is clearly more comfortable deep than he is more comfortable in the intermediate routes.
And that's his guy. Like Ayuk is his guy. The way I keep going back to Kaepernick and Crabtree feels very similar. That's who we trust. I mean, Lance can be a little scattershot with his ball placement. Ayuk is the ultimate. I mean, he can catch whatever. It doesn't matter. I mean, you can throw whatever. Debo doesn't have the long arms, doesn't have the short hands. Great player though. I'm just curious to see how anyway, we're talking quarterbacks here. Trey Lance, the coach says Lance helps the run game tremendously in terms of keeping defenses honest. You can't load the box anymore. That's interesting. Early last year, the threat of no speed made it easy to clog the interior. Cutback lanes are going to be huge. See, that's funny because what I was thinking is you can't play too deep they will kill you if you play too deep. They'll just run it every time. I would love to see a team try to stop this run game with 2 deep safeties when the Niners are getting all 11 players involved in the run game. Good luck with that.
I'll give you a beautiful example because we have one game last year. One of the biggest 2 deep guys is Lovie Smith. He plays an incessant amount of cover 2. And who did Trey Lance go against last year against the Houston Texans? Lovie Smith's 2 deep defense. So what did Trey Lance do that game? 16 to 23. 248 passing yards. The yards per attempt were extremely high in that game, but the run game was also very efficient in that game. Overall, that's just an example of how Lance is able to beat 2 deep. And the one interception that he had was a bad play call because you should not have run that. In the 49ers playbook, that play is specifically designed against cover 1. You shouldn't have run it against a 2 deep look. So that's some context on that play. But overall, when you talk about Trey Lance, he's able to carve that defense up. He's shown it before. And if you run a single high look on him, well, he's got the arm strength where, he can punish you deep.
Yeah. So you would say that, because it seems like what some people are doing is they'll just release the stats from practice and be like, hey, we were tough on Jimmy. Got to keep that same energy with Trey. And the implication is he's having a bad camp. I don't really feel he's having a bad camp. I think the offense is overmatched and he's actually doing some impressive things given what he's up against. How would you characterize his? I asked Brian Grease today to assess his performance. He's like, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? I'm asking you, Rohan. How would you assess his performance?
I also agree. I don't think he's had a bad camp. I don't think he's had an amazing camp. I don't think it's somewhere in the middle. I think he's had a camp that you expect a second-year quarterback with no experience to have, and maybe even better given the deep accuracy, right? Like I said, I don't sugarcoat it. I preface it with details and I try and bring context in the plays. He's been pretty accurate deep. Some of the balls have been incompletions, but intermediate wise, he's thrown balls behind receivers at times, which has been one of an issue. And he's also thrown balls a little in front of receivers. That's where he has to really develop his touch intermediate wise. And it's going to be his biggest battle because unlike Garoppolo, whose arm strength necessarily isn't that much. So he has a specific timing. Trey Lance can really tone down his arm strength at times and also tone up the velocity on his balls. So he has to seriously consider how to balance the touch and how to balance the velocity on those throws in the intermediate range. So that's the important part.
Real quick, what have you seen from Jimmy on the side throwing? What do you think?
I've seen a lot of handshakes with fans. I've seen a lot of smiles. That was the big thing. Like I was surprised the first day he came out when he was running sprints, and it was funny because when you saw Debo, right? Debo did not smile during his time. He was just doing his workout, look locked in. Jimmy was smiling during his sprints. He gave a little acknowledgement to Sourdough Sam and then continued.
Pathetic. Okay, Nate. Sorry, I'm sorry. It's a little pathetic. Nate Sudfeld.
Nate Sudfeld's interesting. So completion percentage has waned in the last couple of days. But I'll start with this. He's been by far the second best quarterback on the team. And
no question.
It's not even because of accuracy. It's because of traits. Brock Purdy cannot throw the ball deep. Like he tried twice and they were both intercepted because the ball.
And he just his whole body into it too. It's like,
it was so funny.
And it goes like
on one of the plays, right? It was like he got sacked, but he's like, nah, I'm going to throw it deep. Marcus Johnson was wide open, 40 yards down the field. Purdy goes to the right. He sets up, does a little two-step, goes right into throw, and the ball just I was like, oh wow, he's gonna hit him. This is gonna be a touchdown. And then he throws the ball, and the ball is in the air for 5-7 seconds. And Taylor Hawkins, who was on the right side of the field, he runs and then he ends up jogging and then has the interception. It was an interesting play.
What do you think was going through Brock Purdy's mind? Touchdown! Oh wait. Sorry, Brock. Yeah, okay. So enough of Brock. We need to talk about Brock. What do you think of Nate, though?
Yeah, so Nate Sudfeld is interesting because he's like a check down master, right? He loves throwing the check down, loves throwing the flat yard. But the 49ers obviously tried to ramp up their install, tried to throw deep. And I applaud Nate Sudfeld for at least trying to throw deep. And even when you're supposed to throw deep, not throw the check down. In practice, at least, right? The completion percentage has waned over the last couple of days. There was a 3 interception day. And to me, what his performance has told me is he's got the arm strength to throw it deep, but he's just not an accurate deep ball thrower. He continuously overthrows quarterbacks, and the plays that he makes are because receivers make great contested catches deep. Brandon Ayuk had a great contested catch on George Odom on one of the plays. He's just not accurate throwing deep, and that's what it's not that it worries me because I don't care about the quarterback number 2 on a team really, because when your starter goes down, your season in a way is over. But Sudfeld, he in my opinion is the epitome of a game manager because he can throw checkdowns. He can probably hand off the ball. At least I hope he can hand off the ball and things like that. So he's been a guy who's pretty much been a short thrower.
Here's where the backup matters though. If the quarterback doesn't go down for the year, it's 3 games.
Correct.
If you lose all 3 games, that could be the difference. You might miss the playoffs. And last year with Arizona, who cares? They didn't do anything in the playoffs. But Colt McCoy got him through that stretch.
Correct.
Can Sudfeld do that? I mean, Lance had a must-win game last year as a backup. I'm asking you. Hard to say.
I think, look, obviously we can't say with pure definition, but I'll say this. If Kyle Shanahan could win with Nick Mullins and with CJ Beathard at times, I'm thinking Nate Sudfeld can carry them through a 3-game stretch where you could rely on the run game. And the difference between those two quarterbacks, they're more accurate. Sudfeld has better traits. So at least in a way, like it might not be the best play, but at least in a way you can show that you can threaten the ball deep, as opposed to the other guys where you all the focus is on the intermediate and short range, right? Because Sudfeld can at least air it.
Mullins would throw that son of a bitch out there.
Would.
He didn't care, but
he didn't care.
I do think that Sudfeld is better than Beathard ever was.
No question. That's true. And I mean,
and he throws a really nice spiral, by the way.
Oh yeah.
He spins it, man.
The ball might not end up in the place you want it to be, but it's a nice throw. It's a nice
majestic.
Throw. Yeah.
All right. So sorry, Nate. He's actually having a decent camp, and it does. He's got to play with Debo a lot last few days. That seems they have a nice connection.
Yeah, they do. And that's where his best throws have been. I think the one thing about Sudfeld that I'm a little more confident about, intermediate-wise, he's had a couple of good throws. He's been able to throw it a little bit in tight windows because his velocity is a little more, given how massive of a quarterback. He's a mammoth. He's like 6'5", 230 pounds or something like that. And his velocity on some of those throws, intermediate, are nice. But overall, the main thing about him is that he can't throw deep.
Yeah, that's true. That was a really good show, Rohan. You killed it. You see a lot in practice. It's hard to see a lot. It's a skill. You got it, man. Nice.
Thank you, man. And sometimes it's really tough, especially like yesterday, right? Because I know you're right there, and even it's tough because everything is. I didn't realize how fast plays go because, like in my notebook, this is ugly right now.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to show it on camera, but like because we're back there, sometimes we have to watch over the first field trying to see the second field.
Oh, that's hard. Do you have binoculars? Do you bring binoculars?
No, I just trust my eyeyesight. I'm like,
that's great.
We do
because sometimes with binoculars, you like get too tunneled in on something, you don't see the whole play.
And also with I just trust what I see and write it down. And I think with binoculars, you really can't do that.
That's a good point. Anyway, follow Rohan on Twitter, subscribe to him on YouTube, read his work on 49ers Web Zone. Is top notch. Thank you, Rohan.
Hey, thank you, Grant. Obviously, appreciate the opportunity. One of the best, especially with the work ethic. So appreciate it. And great show.
Thank you very much. See you, everyone.